This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Significant progress made in ongoing Libya peace talks in Geneva. International donors pledged nearly $2 billion for humanitarian interventions in the Sahel region. And we trace the academic journey of the first Zimbabwean to earn a doctorate in the Chinese language. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Ntal, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, oil drops to $41 a barrel in New York after an increase in American stockpiles. And we take a look at efforts to protect women against online bullying in Tunisia. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Ntal. Let's take a look at some of the stories we have on our radar. We'll start in Libya, where the two warring factions in the country have agreed on issues that directly impact the lives and welfare of the Libyan people. And that's according to the UN envoy for Libya. Stephanie Turko-Williams, who heads the UN support mission for Libya, says they are continuing to do the thorny work to cement the ceasefire in the North African country. This as talks in Geneva continue this week under her mediation. Agreements to open airspace and land routes, as well as to help kickstart Libya's vital oil industry, are on the agenda. Libya is split between a UN-supported government in Tripoli and rival authorities based in the east. The country has been mired in chaos since 2011 after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Adel El-Mahroui joins me now from Cairo. Adel El-Mahroui, once again, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. So good to have you with us. Adel, let me begin by asking you about the significant progress in the Libya peace talks in Geneva. What are the key highlights so far, Adel?
Well, the acting head of the UN SMIL, the mission in Libya, basically says she's very optimistic about the outcomes of the meetings that have been ongoing in Geneva. During her press conference in the mid of the negotiations, she said that the Libyan factions have agreed on several key issues. Among them is within 90 days, they will evacuate all sorts of foreign fighters in the country in a great step to eliminate the foreign intervention and foreign forces inside Libya, if of course it is implemented. She has been working and stressing that this is the key issue. She wants countries who have been involved in Libya to remove their hands from the conflict and leave Libyans to lead their own way. She also announced that Libyans will be moving to open up all highways that connects the east and the west, the two rival blocks for the country itself. Airspace will be open completely. All airports or land ports for Libya will be opened and free travel will be allowed. Finally, one of the crucial issues that has been seen great breakthrough is the petroleum guard. The petroleum security guards are basically forces that have been subject to the control and the management of the Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, the eastern politician and military commander. And that has been an issue. He has managed to block the oil production for about 8 or 9 months, putting the country or giving him also a massive political leverage. So the agreement here is that the commanders of the petroleum security guards are going to be from both the eastern and the western side. So it means that the affiliation of the petroleum guard will not be subject to only one political power than the other, which means that both of them will be sharing the management, the security, and in turn the revenues of the oil from Libya.
All right, Adel, speaking of implementation of previous agreements has been a major challenge. How can the so-called Joint Military Commission change this?
Well, this has been always the issue, as you said, and basically, Richard, this is what many people now are quite concerned. How will this be implemented? But the positive side here is that we're seeing actual steps taking place. We've seen the first flight getting from Tripoli to Benghazi, connecting east and west, taking place on Friday. Now we will be seeing more of that with civilians, with pedestrians, with travelers commuting to see their families and relatives across the country. This makes it much more complicated for even if both parties want to bring back the civil war on the table. It will be so much difficult to do it while the country is literally connected with people moving around. So this is one step for it. If we see positive steps taken in the evacuation of foreign fighters, this will be a great boost to the trust between the two rival factions in the east and the west. So this is one of the main issues as well. The military commission, that's its mission now. Its mission is to make sure that everyone that is armed is Libyan, and its mission is also to reach a format so that it can include all Libyan factions in the military and in the police. If that happens, Libya will no longer be in a crisis.
All right, Adel El-Maroui, thank you so much for your insights and analysis. Adel El-Maroui talking to us live from Cairo. Moving on, soldiers have been accused of opening fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in Africa's biggest city, Lagos. Witnesses said that at least 2 people were shot. Local authorities said that they will investigate. Thousands of Nigerians have demonstrated nationwide for nearly 2 weeks against the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. It has been accused of harassment, torture, and murder for years. The unit was disbanded earlier this month, but protests persist, calling for broader law enforcement reforms. Authorities have imposed a round-the-clock curfew on Lagos. And Sudanese authorities have welcomed the move by the U.S. President Donald Trump to remove the country from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. The removal comes hours after Sudan honored its pledge to pay $335 million to American victims of the 1998 twin terror attacks in the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. The terrorism listing has been a major hurdle for Sudan to access foreign financing and debt relief. Decades of sanctions have hampered efforts by Sudan's transitional government to revive the economy. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok hailed the delisting as a big win for Sudan.
This decision will allow us to manage the economy with a better environment and totally new effective mechanisms. Removing Sudan from the terror list will open the door widely for Sudan to legitimately return to the international community.
We have been working thoroughly for a whole year, the cabinet, as well as experts, to achieve this goal for Sudan to return back to its right, legitimate position, and for the Sudanese people to return to their life.
Well, the Sudanese people have also welcomed the U.S. decision to remove the North African country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Let's hear what they had to say.
Removing Sudan from the terrorist list will add a lot to Sudan and the Sudanese people. It will pave way for Sudan to be relieved of its debts, which Sudan suffered for the last 20 years, and will open the door for mutual interest relation between the U.S., which is considered a world power, and Sudan, and also will open relations with the rest of the world.
I am among the Sudanese citizens who feel that this is a very important step to be able to bring companies to invest in Sudan. Most of the international companies couldn't work in Sudan for fear of facing sanctions.
Staying in Sudan, the International Criminal Court says former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir must face justice without further delay. Bashir and 3 other suspects are accused of alleged war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. The conflict in Darfur that escalated in 2003 has displaced over 2 million people. Bashir was removed from office in April last year following months of protest. He has been in jail in Khartoum since his ouster. The ICC chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, said options for prosecution could include a trial in Sudan and a hybrid tribunal.
The ICC has outstanding arrest warrants against Mr. Omar al-Bashir, Mr. Ahmed Haroun, Mr. Abdel Rahim Mohammed Hussein, and Mr. Abdallah Banda Abakar Nourain. and these suspects are still wanted for the atrocity crimes listed in their ICC warrants of arrest. They must all face justice without further delay. I am encouraged by the frank and open and constructive exchanges we have had. I particularly welcome the assurances of support and cooperation expressed to me by the authorities during this visit, including from His Excellency Prime Minister Hamdok. This first historic visit to Khartoum, after more than a decade, provided an opportunity for Sudan's transitional government to demonstrate its commitment to justice, to accountability, and to the rule of law.
This is the first visit by the International Criminal Court or ICC officials to Sudan since former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted and jailed last year. The ICC says its prosecutor is discussing with Sudanese authorities how to bring justice for the victims of crimes committed in Darfur by Omar al-Bashir's government. The ICC says it also wants to find ways on how to cooperate with the Sudanese judiciary on issues related to Darfur. Former President Omar al-Bashir is currently facing a number of charges in Sudan's courts, including for corruption. The ICC team is also discussing how to collect evidence against Sudanese people suspected of committing crimes by the prosecutor in the Hague-based court. The peace deal signed by the Sudanese parties in September dictates that the Khartoum government cooperates with the ICC. Former President al-Bashir is indicted by the ICC with other officials of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. In 2009 and 2010, the Hague-based court issued arrest warrants for the then Sudan's President al-Bashir. The conflict in Darfur has killed an estimated 300,000 people. Omar al-Bashir's lawyer has repeatedly denounced the court's charges against the former president as politically motivated. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Let's turn our attention to Burundi now, where ex-President Pierre Buyoya has been sentenced to life in prison in absentia over the assassination of his successor in 1993. According to a court ruling, Buyoya was convicted for an attack against the then head of state, President Melchior Ndadaye, who was overthrown during a coup that plunged the country into civil war. 18 high-ranking military officials and civilians who were close to Buyoya received the same sentence. In November 2018, Burundi issued an international arrest warrant against Buyoya, which he denounced. Buyoya is currently the African Union's representative in Mali. A new cabinet has been formed in Somalia, comprising of more than 70 ministers, deputies, and state ministers. The appointment comes as the country plans to elect new lawmakers and a president in the coming months. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has the story.
Less than a month into his new role, Somali Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has appointed a new council of ministers as the country plans to go to the polls in the coming months. The new cabinet consists of 26 ministries and a deputy prime minister. The majority of the new ministers served in the previous administration under Hassan Ali Khaire, who was voted out of office in July after falling out with President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. New names also featured in the list, with changes made to key ministries including security, justice and education. Mahdi Guled Khadar retained his role as deputy prime minister.
The new cabinet has a huge task ahead. With a very limited time frame, the selection process seems to have favored allies close to the current office holders, like president and prime minister.
Delivering credible elections remains the biggest task. Elections for new lawmakers and senators is set to commence in November, with presidential polls set for February 2021.
The cabinet's test is whether or not credible elections will be delivered during this transitional period. Security must also be guaranteed during this campaign period. Basically, the new cabinet has a huge role to play, despite all the odds.
The new cabinet awaits parliamentary approval. The Somali president has urged lawmakers to approve the new administration that he terms as competent and capable of undertaking critical tasks ahead. Across the country, campaigning is in top gear. Parliamentary aspirants are seeking grassroots support from local elders who will play a crucial role in the electoral process. Members of parliament and senators will eventually pick a new president next year. Farmajo is expected to compete against former presidents as well as his former Prime Minister Hassan Ali Khaire, who recently announced his ambitions for the country's top job. However, the Somali public will have no say in the process. In August, leaders failed to agree on how to conduct a popular vote, a move that will have given the Somali public a chance at electing their preferred leaders for the first time in more than 5 decades. Abdul Aziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We will see you on the other side of the break with more news. Here's a look at what's ahead. International donors pledged nearly $2 billion for humanitarian interventions in the Sahel region. And we look at efforts to protect women against online bullying in Tunisia.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. 24 donors have pledged nearly $1.7 billion to scale up life-saving humanitarian aid to millions of people in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The pledges were made at a virtual high-level ministerial conference on the Central Sahel on Tuesday. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has that story.
Violence has displaced more than 1.5 million people in the Central Sahel region over the past 2 years. Gender-based violence has spiked. Millions of children are out of school, and basic health and social services are lacking.
I brought my son to Gao Hospital because he was seriously ill. He even passed out. I thought he was going to die.
Our displacement is due to the conflict. Many people were injured, and we were very afraid of the reprisals, and so we had to flee and come here.
Poverty, food insecurity, and climate change are persistent challenges, especially for people living in the border region between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. More than 13 million people need humanitarian assistance.
We need to reverse this downward spiral with a renewed push for peace and reconciliation. And we need to make space for vital humanitarian assistance and investments in development and people. The Sahel is a microcosm of cascading global risk converging in one region. It is a warning sign for us all, requiring urgent attention and resolution.
At a virtual ministerial conference, European donors pledged over $1.7 billion to scale up aid in the region. The international community has been struggling to counter the deteriorating situation.
Because in Burkina Faso, our pipeline shuts down in November. We run out of money, and we will no longer be able to feed people in Burkina Faso. In Mali, in January, we run out of money. And so it's a desperate situation. 300,000 people we were feeding per month just a year ago. Now, 1.2 million just in Burkina Faso. 300,000 people that were in severe food insecurity now is multiples of over 3 million people. and it's only getting worse, and time is not on our side.
Once released, the funds will help around 10 million people for the remainder of this year and through 2021. The UN Secretary General says long-term solutions would come through sustainable development and good governance. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Authorities say China is taking the lead in COVID-19 vaccine research and development. 13 vaccine candidates are in varying stages of clinical trials. Of these, 4 are in phase 3 trials, the last step before submission for regulatory approval. The country began phase 1 trials in mid-March and phase 2 in mid-April. So far, no serious side effects have been reported among 60,000 volunteers. The World Health Organization says there are now nearly 200 registered candidate vaccines globally, with 44 of them in clinical evaluation. Chinese officials say the vaccines appear safe after over 60,000 volunteers took part in the trials with no severe adverse reactions reported. But what concerns the public most is when the vaccine candidate will be declared ready for public use. Earlier we talked with Professor Wu Jiwei. He's a director of Center for Public Health Research at Nanjing University Medical School. Here is his opinion.
It's in normal situation, it would take a little bit while, but right now, I mean, in a particular situation that all the vaccines against the COVID-19 is under expedited mechanism for approval. So I would expect that by end of this year we would start seeing some vaccines get approved, and probably early next year. Well, usually you see after a vaccine is approved, then manufacturers will ramp up their production capacities. But I mean, China has been preparing for this manufacturing capacity for quite a little bit while. So I just heard that they will be able to produce around 600 million doses of vaccines by end of this year. So I think this is very encouraging that if the vaccine get approved, then I would expect that early next year there will be some vaccines in the domestic market. The manufacturers actually could impact on the effectiveness of the vaccine in containing a global pandemic, such as how the virus transmitted, how effective the vaccine will induce effective immune response. Various experts have put up their predictions. I think pretty much it's in the ballpark of something like 70 to 80%. So as we can see that because this is a global pandemic, it still will take some time to reach that kind of percentage to be immune.
An Egyptian inventor has made a robot that can replace doctors in some tasks needed in the treatment and handling of COVID-19 patients. The robot is equipped with precise mechanics and can take nose and throat swabs required for coronavirus testing as well as temperature checks. CGTN's Adel El Marroui has the details.
You have no fever. Please put on your face mask, says the robot. This is one of several robotic prototypes Egyptian inventors have recently created in efforts to curb human COVID-19 infections. 26-year-old engineer Mahmoud El-Komi built it to take over several tasks done by medical staff.
The robot is economically efficient. It will save usage of PPE equipment like suits, shields and face masks, which are needed by medical staff. It will save doctors from getting sick. No matter how much it costs, it won't be as much as saving a medic's life during the pandemic.
The robot can detect whether face masks are worn properly. It can monitor temperature readings of crowds, making it useful in many public areas, including hospitals. And if someone is not wearing a face mask or has fever, it sounds an alarm and informs an operator. And when positioned at gates, it will prohibit their access to other areas. According to El-Komi, when operated autonomously, it has an accuracy of up to 90% in detecting COVID-19 symptoms.
We could face biological wars or witness other pandemics which could be more fatal. This robot helps in enforcing distancing and could be very useful in the future. Several governmental entities have already contacted us, and we are currently planning on how to make that robotic technology widely available.
The young Egyptian engineer is currently working on version 3 of his prototype. This model is able to take nasal and mouth swabs for COVID-19 tests, and he's building an AI system so that the robot can look for symptoms of the disease in chest scans. The prototype costs about $5,000, a figure that will sharply drop when mass production of the robot begins. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Tunisia, a new campaign has been combating cyber violence against women. The online campaign mainly targets young people on social media platforms. The campaign was launched by the Center for Research Studies, Documentation and Information on Women and the United Nations Population Fund. Adnan Shwashi has more.
The national online campaign is part of the recommendations of a survey carried out by Credif in 2019 on violence against women on social media. The study focused on thousands of case studies in the North African country.
The study shows that 89% of women are victims of cyber violence, that is, 4 out of 5 women. In addition, 95% of them do not file a complaint. This campaign aims to explain violence on social networks and the digital world to sensitize people to this permanent threat, which has psychological repercussions on women's lives as well as the whole society.
Najla Alani added that the campaign aims to make women victims of violence aware of the need to file a complaint so as to strengthen the legal framework relating to cyber violence and to raise awareness about the repercussions of this new form of violence, especially on girls.
As activists, we urge women to break the walls of silence by talking about cyber violence. The victims usually accept the status quo because women either fear the reaction of the society or ignore their rights. The absolute majority of victims are girls. They don't know that violence on social media, daily tracking and harassment are crimes. 49% of the perpetrators are young men.
Anissa Mokshah is a journalist and a women's rights advocate. She often reports on the increase in cyber violence targeting women in Tunisia. Mokshah blames the negative cultural and media attitude towards women in the whole Arab region.
The Arab society in general always blames women for any problem, including cyber violence. Some people even justify this violence by claiming that women provoke men with their clothing, freedom, or financial independence. The image of women is very negative in society. Our role is to show how successful women can be and to stop the wave of violence in the virtual and real world.
The recent study conducted by the Center for Research Studies, Documentation and Information on Women defines virtual violence as an aggressive act or threat of aggression against women based on discrimination that can be material, moral, or economic using social media. The online campaign will target over 7 million internet users in Tunisia. Women's rights activists assert that the growing reach of the internet and the widespread use of social networks have created new challenges as well as multiple ways to address violence against women and girls. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And now let's remind you of our top stories. The two warring factions in Libya have agreed on issues that directly impact the lives and welfare of the Libyan people. And that's according to the UN envoy for Libya, Stephanie Turko-Williams, who heads the UN support mission for Libya, says efforts to cement a ceasefire have made good progress. Soldiers have been accused of opening fire on Nigerians protesting against police brutality in Africa's biggest city, Lagos. Witnesses said that at least 2 people were shot. Local authorities said that they will investigate. Thousands of Nigerians have demonstrated nationwide for nearly 2 weeks against the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And 24 donors have pledged nearly $1.7 billion to scale up life-saving humanitarian aid to millions of people in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. The pledges were made at a virtual high-level ministerial conference on the Central Sahel on Tuesday. And that's a look at some of the top stories making headlines. Up next is your business segment. Don't go away. Here's what's ahead. Coming up in business, oil drops to $41 a barrel in New York after an increase in American stockpiles. And real estate prices dropped by more than 10% in Uganda.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Oil has dropped towards $41 a barrel in New York after an industry report pointed to a surprise increase in American crude stockpiles, countering optimism over a potential U.S. stimulus agreement. The American Petroleum Institute reported crude inventories climbed by almost 600,000 barrels, according to people familiar with the data. Now, futures advanced on Tuesday as U.S. lawmakers moved closer to a package to bolster the economic recovery from the virus-driven downturn. Oil's recovery is facing pressure from a resurgent coronavirus and expanding supply from Libya. OPEC Plus has warned the market faces precarious outlooks, with Kelly Ali Russia saying that the group won't be making any decisions on the direction of its output cuts before a ministerial meeting scheduled for the end of November. The tech sector is closely watching the U.S. presidential elections to anticipate how the next administration will handle the China-U.S. technology ecosystem. The past year has been a rocky one for the sector, especially for those Chinese tech companies aiming to drive global innovation. Mark New explains.
From 5G mobile leader Huawei to instant messaging and payment platform WeChat to social media phenom TikTok. Each has been hit by restrictions and bans from the Trump administration, disrupting supply chains and sending Chinese tech investment in the U.S. plummeting.
We've seen a reduction of Chinese investment in the United States as a whole in the last several quarters, and it is something that we are looking to the next administration to really address and to rebuild and repair those relationships.
University of San Francisco international marketing professor Stanley Kwong says two-way capital flows between the U.S. and China dropped to a 9-year low.
This year is the worst. Under the past few administration, technology was quite open, right? And maybe the issue is that some people are saying they're way too open, but now it's way too much on the other side.
Facing heavy U.S. government scrutiny, Chinese investment in high-tech areas like artificial intelligence has completely shut down. But Kwong says many small and medium-sized businesses still have hopes of investing in the U.S., but in much lower tech areas such as auto and machine parts. He believes these companies want a more predictable U.S. president.
Chinese always want stability. They don't sense Trump as somebody who's very stable in decision making. And they start seeing that Biden maybe at least they understood what they need to do with the Obama administration.
The Silicon Valley Leadership Group represents more than 350 U.S. companies, many in the tech sector, including industry leaders like Apple and Facebook.
We're losing economic growth. We're losing access to supply chains. We're losing access to global research partners. And we're exposing Silicon Valley innovation economy companies to potential retribution or retaliation from foreign countries.
Professor Kwong fears that if the next president, whoever that may be, fails to address the crisis, the divide could worsen.
My belief that eventually, if we continue the U.S. same path, that would be basically two, I would say, technology system going on, right? And which is something that the Silicon Valley do not like, because Silicon Valley is so much into trying to grow and so much the whole supply chain.
Huang says the tension hurts Chinese tech companies too. For example, the U.S. currently bans Chinese tech giant Huawei from getting TSMC semiconductors, which puts their chips several generations behind and delays its 5G products. So in this election, big tech on both sides of the Pacific watch closely, knowing that the future of access and innovation could be on the line. Mark New, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
Central banks across the world have been forced to give digital currencies a second look as they seem to be growing in popularity. A shift in spending habits coupled with the speed of technological developments means that crypto cannot be ignored much longer. CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports that the central bank in Egypt is now mulling its own cryptocurrency.
Calls of adopting digital currencies are growing daily, and after initially hesitating to embrace virtual money, central banks worldwide are increasingly beginning to weigh their options. The rise of Facebook's Libra currency is one of the reasons central banks are changing their stance. But there could be other benefits of adopting digital currencies.
First of all, the corona pandemic has revealed the advantages of cryptocurrencies, such as fast transactions, has a safe coded system in financial and currency exchange, as well as maintaining social distancing, and does not use paper currency, which we know can transmit the virus. Cryptocurrencies have finalized transactions of around $350 billion, which is a huge amount that countries would want a share of.
After it had earlier refused to consider the idea, the Egyptian Central Bank now says it is conducting a comprehensive study about the possibility of introducing the virtual money into the country's economy. However, one of the concerns is the instability of these currencies.
The value of the cryptocurrencies changes drastically in short periods. It could increase a lot and drop again quickly, making it unstable and unsafe for business. Unlike the US dollar, for example, that is more stable. Another concern is the use of digital currencies for money laundering, crimes and terrorism. There is no central authority that monitors transactions to prevent its misuse. These are issues being discussed globally by central banks, as well as other challenges, too, in implementation.
As for Egypt, many of the stock market investors are willing to transact in virtual currencies if they are adopted.
I can use it because it's fast, easy, and no need for cash or notes on me. It protects me from crime and facilitates purchases and transactions.
Experts and officials worldwide have cast their eyes on China. It is already trialing the virtual currency in the prominent business city of Shenzhen before going nationwide. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Streaming giant Netflix has embarked on broadcasting more African-made content and working with telecom operators. This is in a bid to make it easier for potential subscribers in key markets to make payments. The company, which has 193 million subscribers globally, is keen to expand in Africa. It is also seeking ways to overcome challenges, including slow and expensive internet and the lack of proper payments infrastructure on the continent. Netflix has also set up unique tools and settings on its platforms to allow subscribers to choose their mobile data consumption plans carefully when streaming due to high costs of high-speed internet access in some countries.
The business is excited about Africa, and it's putting every effort behind it. And we are investing very seriously in it. And in terms of our strategy, we've always said that we do believe that great stories come from anywhere and they can be loved everywhere across the world. And it's no different with African stories. And so our plans for the continent, they're similar to our global strategy. We just want to bring the best-in-class content from our local storytellers to our audiences around the world. Because the African continent is very rich in storytelling. We have a great oral storytelling culture, and we enjoy telling amazing stories. We want to tell amazing stories in different languages. People have different tastes. We just want to cater for this different people, both in Africa and around the world.
The market for commercial real estate has tanked globally as COVID-19 depresses incomes. Kampala in Uganda is no different. Players, however, see the situation as only temporary. CGTN's Michael Baleke has reports.
New housing projects in Kampala are still going up, but official figures show that prices have fallen by over 10%. According to Uganda's Bureau of Statistics, the drop has been driven by the COVID-19 pandemic.
You know, most people come from abroad and buy houses here and there, but of course there were no travels, and some of the services weren't operating, and those are some of the factors that could have caused that drop.
The Bureau of Statistics says that before the pandemic struck, prices had been steady or moving upwards. Real estate analysts say the lockdown measures to control the spread of the virus meant job losses, in turn affecting incomes.
We're now beginning to get a sense of pressure on people in various ways. People are cutting on their space requirements, people are cutting on the quality of their tenancies, people also are cutting a lot on how they lived before. So luxuries are being dropped and people are only paying attention to the basics.
Uganda's real estate sector is heavily debt dependent, and there is a chain reaction. The fall in the price of property will have an impact on the profits of the developers and subsequently their ability to pay back loans.
There is a projection that non-performing loans will increase from 4.5% to 10%. So obviously, eventually that is bound to have a consequence or an impact on the pricing of financing.
The pandemic has also reduced the cost of land, which has attracted several developers to set up new projects. Some property developers say if the prices continue to fall and the situation drags on for months, they will hold and delay the listing of their properties for sale in anticipation of future price increases. Uganda has a housing deficit of 2.1 million units, and real estate agents say Kampala carries the bulk of that burden, making it still attractive for developers to set up new properties.
Real estate is long term. Yeah, it's long term. So you're talking about investment over 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. So that means that any short-term, effects or any short-term hindrances would not substantially hold it back. And so for those who know the game and have the muscle, this is a small speed bump. It is not a bridge washed away.
However, the fall in prices of residential properties is also an exciting opportunity for many Ugandans with cash flows to buy at a bargain. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, staying in Uganda, the trading arm of the Toyota Group has invested $4 million in a Ugandan startup, Tukunde. Now, the project aims to offer small loans for businessmen in the informal sector and provide financing for customers hoping to purchase Toyota vehicles. CGTN's Chao Mgono has that report.
Mark Yahweh, like many young businessmen in the informal sector, has turned to commercial banks in hopes of securing a loan to boost his business. He has not always been successful. This time, however, Yahweh is one of the few who get to access a financing facility from Ugandan company Tugende. He's been making a living by driving someone else's bike for the last 3 years. With a down payment at Tugende, he gets to ride his own bike and can start building his business.
For the terms and conditions, I find them to be favorable because when I go to a private motorcycle owner, he gives me a motorbike to ride on a rent basis. Yet, when I come to Tugende, they give me a motorbike with taxes paid.
Launched in 2012, Tugende offers motorcycle mortgages to riders. But the bikers only receive the logbook after the final payment is made. With banks reluctant to lend money to small or informal businesses in Africa due to the high rate of defaulting, clients like Yahweh have a second option.
They don't have adequate financial access to the banks, traditional banks, and so on. And so because of that problem, let's say, the challenge in the financial access, so those micro SMEs or individual business entrepreneurs have a difficulty to expand their businesses and so on. And then we believe this has to be solved.
After a client takes all of the trainings, they move to a field-based screening where they have to pay a small application fee, and then our team goes and visits them at their place of work and at their home. And we're looking for people who already have business experience.
With an asset base of $30 million, Tugende has handed out about 35,000 bike mortgages so far, a small fraction of the Ugandan market, estimated at 800,000 riders.
What we've realized is that there is an enormous demand for credit for small and medium businesses across Africa, and it's very difficult for them to access credit from most standard banks, and even a lot of technology-led lenders are small loans and very expensive. So the Tugende model is all about helping people own income-generating assets where the cash flow they make from their entrepreneurial activities can pay a loan or a mortgage or a hire purchase lease so that they go from renting to owning in a short period of time.
Payments are made via cell phone mobile money service and other digital platforms. Clients like John Anario say he has been able to expand his transportation business.
I got a car from Tugende of 21 million on lease. I driven it. After driving it, I paid it in cash. I completed the lease of the car, and I came back for the bike which I have now. So what I benefited from Tugende, it's too much.
According to a 2017 report by the International Finance Corporation, the financing gap for micro, small and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated at $331 billion. Tugende hopes to expand its existing motorcycle mortgages, grow its new motor vehicle financing product, and go to new markets in the region. Chom Hono, CGTN.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a pretty interesting story for you after the break. Let's take a peek at that headline. We trace the academic journey of the first Zimbabwean to earn a doctorate in the Chinese language.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The year 2020 marks the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Senegal, which is the current co-chair, will host the FOCAC meeting next year in Dakar. Senegal's Minister of Culture and Communication now shares his views on the cultural significance of FOCAC.
Today in Senegal, the will of the head of state, President Macky Sall, is to restore and put culture at the center of our economic and social development. I believe that today, you take a bit of the landscape of Dakar in terms of infrastructure. There is this firm desire for cultural infrastructure. Today, the great example is the Museum of Black Civilization, which thanks to cooperation with China, has emerged to be the 5th museum of the 250 in the world. This means that today, Senegal, thanks to the dynamism of cooperation, manages to set up infrastructure worthy of the name, which responds to our cultural policy.
Herbert Mushangwe is the first Zimbabwean to earn a doctorate in Chinese, an achievement he owes to both negative and positive factors that pushed him to learn the language. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya has more from Harare.
Herbert Mushangwe recalls that Zimbabwe's economic situation was so dire in 2007, his monthly salary couldn't buy a pair of shoes. Frustrated, he jumped at the chance to study in China. Once there, a devoted tutor helped him quickly learn the language.
So Su Laoshi, she was a lady, an old woman who was just in love with her language. So she would speak to us every time in Chinese. She could not speak even a single word in English, of course, except okay and good. So if you do well, she would say good. And if you say something correct, she would say okay. You get it? So those are the two words. But the way she was teaching us, she was kind of a motivator. If you miss class, she would call you. If you don't come to class for 2 days, she would come to your home and knock at the door, ask you, are you okay? So that kind of love, I felt like, wow, I had another mother in China. So I really felt in love with the language.
At that time, Mushangwe began compiling the Chinese Shona dictionary.
So when you see that this dictionary was done by a local Zimbabwean, then you are challenged to say, if he could make it, then I can.
In 2015, he earned his PhD in applied Chinese linguistics from Hebei University and was elevated to professor upon his return home.
Having mastered the language, Mushangwe is now imparting what he knows to others, helping them to understand not just the words and symbols, but also Chinese culture.
I'm still not yet done. I will still continue to contribute. I will still continue to do more projects so that, we make this language probably one of the languages that can be spoken in Zimbabwe, and not only spoken, but benefit the people in Zimbabwe. There are so many things that I think we are losing because we don't know the language and the culture.
He has some seemingly simple yet profound advice for his students.
A language, it's something that you need to be humble. You need to be like a baby if you want to learn it. If you don't humble yourself to be like a baby, you never learn it.
With the right commitment, he says, even Chinese, considered hard by many, is easy to learn. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Guess what? We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Let's take a look at the headline. In sports, Rashford stuns PSG again as Manchester United emerge victorious in Paris.